Hey guys, Fox here, and today we're going to be doing part 1 of my thoughts on the top 50 players of 2022 list. For those of you who don't know, the USFL network team is putting together a list that is voted by them, the players, and coaches of the USFL on doing essentially like the top 100 of the NFL, except it's the top 50 for the USFL, top 50 players 2022. So how these are going to work is I'm going to first off list every single player that is on the list for the part. Today is the first 25, the next will be the next 15, then the last 10. So I'll list every one of these players in case you haven't kept up with it or don't know about it. I'll go over some of the guys that I think are noteworthy who made the list, and then I'll go over guys who I think either got snubbed, shouldn't have been on the list, or are just overall placed too low or too high. So without further ado, let's just get started by looking at the players. For the first 10, we have Stallions, Bo Scarborough at 50, the Bandits, Cheyenne Grady at 49. Then we have Chris Rowland from the Stars at 48, Dominique Davis from the Gamblers at 47, Juwan Washington at 46 for the Bandits, Carlo Kemp at 45 for the Maulers, Vontae Diggs at 44 for the Breakers, Mark Thompson at 43 for the Gamblers, DeAndre Johnson at 42 for the Generals, and Micah Abernathy for the Gamblers at 41. The next 10, we have Isaiah Zuber at 40, Ike Brown at 39, Matt Colburn at 38, Jordan Ellis at 37, Bailey Gaither at 36, Scooby Wright at 35, Bug Howard at 34, Cam Hunt at 33, Reggie Howard at 32, and Jordan Tamu at 31. And then the last 5, we have Jay Adams at 30, Brandon Aubrey at 29, Bryce Tornan at 28, Jerron Jones at 27, and Adam Rodriguez at 26. The first player I want to shout out, now that we've listed all of them, is going to be the guy who came in at 50 himself in Bo Scarborough. You may be wondering why I want to talk about the guy who came in at 50th, just because he's the 50th guy on the list, but no. To put it simply, Bo Scarborough came in basically halfway through the season. He started 5 games and he played 6 of them, and he was really, really insane in those games. He had 350 yards, and to put it simply, that means that if he had played the whole year, he might have gotten the most rushing yards in the entire season. He had 58.7 rush yards a game, which was good enough for third in the entire league. He did have only 1 rushing touchdown, but he didn't fumble the ball a single time, and his 4.2 average yards per rush were pretty good. And then you get into the postseason and what he did, and you realize Bo was really incredible in the postseason as well. In fact, he was even better. In the 2 games he played, he had 174 rushing yards. That is literally more than the next 3 guys combined. He played in both games naturally, and he just was so much better than his counterpart in CJ Maribel. He did more than the Stars running backs. It's just, he was insane. He averaged 87 yards a game technically, and his average yards per attempt was 7.3, which is unbelievably insane. Which did include a 70-yard rush, so it is helped a lot by that. But even without that 70-yard rush, he still would have had more, or that 70-yard rush, he still would have had he would have had 40 more yards than next place. To put it simply, he was incredible during both the season and postseason, and I would argue that you could make a case he should have gotten even higher on the list than he did, despite not playing that many games. The next guy I want to talk about a little bit is Mark Thompson, who came in at 43. Even though he did technically play in 9 games, he really was hurt for a couple of games and played hurt during some of them. And for that Gamblers team, he was overall a really great running back. He was basically leading the entire league in rushing yard for most of the season. It just was that injuries kind of hurt him at the wrong time. But even with that, he still had over 460 yards, which is good enough for 5th in the entire league. And his 2 rushing touchdowns is, okay, and it's not the best, but you also got to consider the fact that he only had a 55-yard longest rush, which 2 of the guys who were above him had longer rushes. So in terms of just being a great, consistent running back, he was a very solid player who definitely was very solid. He definitely deserved to be on this list. I just want to shout him out because if he had been able to play a full season, I really do think he probably would have been in the top 40 and arguably even like the top 35. The third guy I want to talk about is going to be the Stars' Bug Howard. To put it simply, Bug as a tight end was not really viewed as this best tight end in the league, mainly due to Sal Cannell and his excellent playoff game. And though I do believe Sal was better than him, I think Bug was just a hair under him and was really overall probably a bit underrated in the league. His 371 receiving yards were actually tied for the 7th most in the entire league and was more than Sal Cannella by just a couple, but it still was more. And he did average more yards a reception as well than Sal Cannella at nearly 2 more yards per reception. And he did actually have 2 more touchdowns than Sal. Even though, yes, in terms of postseason, Sal had that one unbelievable game in the game that the Breakers lost the Stallions in the first round. And Bug Howard might not have, been as excellent as you would have hoped in the postseason, as his stats were overall pretty pedestrian during the postseason. The fact is that during his regular season, he was a very outstanding tight end who was definitely probably one of the more underrated players in the league during his time. The last player I want to just straight up mention is going to be 29 Brandon Aubrey. I really respect the players, coaches, and all them for putting a kicker on here. As for really at least the first 6 games, Aubrey was literally automatic. He ended the season as still the best kicker in the league. His 82% was the best of any kicker that played all 10 games for field goals, and his 91.7% for extra points does the same deal. In fact, only the Bandits kicker Rasa, who didn't play one game, had a better percentage in that regard. But in terms of total points, Aubrey had the most kicking points by 10 points, with the second being Nick Vogel, who was a bit more inaccurate overall. The fact is Aubrey was literally automatic for the first few weeks of the season, and even at the end when he tapered off a bit, he still didn't really fall that hard in any of his averages. Definitely deserved to be on this list, and a major shout out to everyone for voting him in. Now, in terms of who got snubbed or who should have been higher or lower on the list, for these first 25, I think there's one guy that really shouldn't have been on the list, and that's Chris Rowland. To put it simply, he didn't do enough. I mean, he was only a starter a couple weeks and, things like that, but overall, the fact is that he didn't play enough or do enough. He only had 200 receiving yards and 100 return yards to really justify being that high. Now, if he had balled out in the playoffs, something I could understand that. But even then, it's not like he really did do that much. He didn't do enough in the league to deserve being this high on here. Which, yeah, I know saying that 48 is insane, but especially when Derek Dillon didn't make it. Derek Dillon is the guy that got snubbed on this list. The fact is that he was second in the league in yards after catch. That's a huge stat for receivers, as that shows that you can get the pass and just keep going. He was second to the league MVP Kevontae Turpin and was second by over 50 yards for third place. And the fact is that he got his receptions and stuff like that in an insane 28 receptions. His 386 yards in total were good enough for sixth in the league, but his 28 receptions that he had, there were only really 2 other guys above him that were close to him, and both of them had a couple more in Adams and Williams, but everyone else had at least 10 more receptions than him. The fact is Dillon had an outstanding year. His 4 reception touchdowns was really solid too, tied for second in the league. The fact that he didn't even make the list is it's not even like that, he came in later, because at this point almost the whole list is done. He will literally not be on the list, despite the fact that he's clearly did enough to deserve being on here. Dillon is definitely the biggest snub. As for guys that I'm shocked at where they were placed, a couple of them you could say there might have been some changes, but really, I'm shocked that Bryce Tornan was as low on the list as he was, as he was one of the 2 all-USFL safeties, Shalem Luani, and Luani's much higher on the list than Tornan is. And the fact is that Mahler's defense was pretty decent, and he was a huge reason why. And I'm kind of shocked he ended up being this low. I could have definitely seen him being a bit higher. As for anyone else, I actually can't really say the same for him. I think that aside from Chris Rowland making it over Dillon and where Tornadin made it, I think overall this list, at least for the first 25, is pretty solid. I would argue that DeAndre Johnson, though, should definitely be higher. That's the only other one. DeAndre Johnson was incredible in the games he played in, and we'll get to it in the next part, but the fact that Luis Perez is so much higher above him is really unbelievable to me. They both were very comparable overall in that offense, and the fact that one guy is being placed about 30 spots under the other one is just insanely criminal. As well as the guy that I had in my top 10 in Jordan Ellis. Jordan Ellis was the league leader in rushing yards, and I know some of his other stats weren't as good as you'd want him, but the fact is he was the league leader in rush yards by a bit, and he did have 4 rushing touchdowns as well, and he only fumbled once. The fact that he's also as low on the list as he is insane. As I knew I was reaching a bit with him, but I expected him to be at least in the top 25. Man, he didn't even get top 30. That was definitely the biggest surprise. him, DeAndre Johnson, and Tornadin, though Tornadin a little bit less. But yeah, those three, and then the fact that Derek Dillon didn't make it and Chris Rowland did, those are definitely the ones that I say are a bit extreme. But overall, that'll do it for the first part of this. The second part will come out in the next few days or something like that, naturally. We'll cover the next 15 guys, so that'll be 25 to 11. This has been ZomFox. If you enjoy this content and want to be notified about any videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Leave a comment down below about what your thoughts on the list are, at least to this point. Make sure to have a great night.